All right. Today we have our next episode of the Conveyor podcast. Here is where we listen to how business leaders manage and master executive communications on their terms to achieve success. So today we have Sean Nasiri from JAS Ventures. Welcome aboard, Sean.
Happy to be here. Thank you, Quinn.
So Sean was born and raised in Silicon Valley. He's done a lot with community, which, as the founder of Community Company, I like talking and thinking about communications from a community and stakeholder standpoint. And the reason why Sean has a lot of insight around community communications is because he started his career launching an equity crowdfunding platform. The name of these ones were called Generator and Start Engine. And then we both have some experience in cryptocurrencies and digital assets. He went and launched a Reg A plus equity crowdfunding tokenization platform called TokenSolve. So welcome aboard, Sean. And so you've told me that you've got this background from Silicon Valley. Your goal was to bring the Valley everywhere else. And what you did share on our prep call was that you're planning to build out your personal brand a little bit more. You're in the early process of doing that. So how's that going so far for you?
Yeah, thank you, Quinn. And just a quick caveat on the intro. I founded Generator. Start Engine was the Reg A Plus platform that I then ended up launching as Director of Investments. And then TokenSoft is the tokenization platform that I was a part of, where I sort of led the East Coast operations expansion as we focus more on tokenizing real world assets and equities, where the SF team focused more on the cryptocurrencies. So just clearing that up. And then back to the question you just asked around the LinkedIn posts and building personal brand. I think in venture capital, it's kind of a very much a who's who and what's what sort of world. Relationships, brands, reputation are absolutely critical in getting into and winning deals. The more competitive, the more important that is. Now, different people go about building their brand and reputation in different ways. There's plenty of really successful investors that sort of like to stay off the radar in the traditional channels, but the who's who and the right people all know who they are and can vouch for them, which are a bit more of the older generation. I think amongst the younger generation, having a sort of digital presence and reputation becomes pretty critical, especially now as venture capital is sort of transitions from a fairly generic enterprise SaaS sort of dominated industry to now being way more tech forward with AI, with robotics, semiconductor resurgence, advanced technologies, deep tech, defense tech. It's important, especially if you don't come from a technical background like myself, to find different ways to sort of communicate how you think, where you're researching, and how you're spending your time.
I've heard a little bit around venture capital going through its own disruption, in the sense that there's for a while during the zero interest rate environment, there was a lot of risk capital available. And so there was this decoupling of the three main things that venture capital does, which to me is providing funding mainly, but then providing advice or traction. And so advice is either in the form of being an advisor or a board member, and then also providing traction, which is around providing early commercialization, entry points, customers, key hires, things like that. And so I'm not surprised that there's some differentiation and a need for VCs to build platforms across either of those three things that they provide.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'll touch on the easiest kind of low-hanging fruit that you brought up, which is venture capital helping with sort of customers and commercialization and distribution. Historically, very, very few investors were truly able to provide that. It was one of those sort of value adds that a lot of entrepreneurs who felt burned will point to. But I think now, again, as we're shifting from a SaaS dominated industry to now back to hard tech, chips, AI, sort of newer technology, I'm finding that it's one of the very first questions that a hot startup is going to ask is, what customers in my industry can you introduce me to? Distribution is becoming absolutely paramount to a lot of companies, and it's something that VCs are going to have to think about more closely. Then again, there's also plenty of founders who kind of want a hands-off VC, but to kind of go back to your earlier analysis between the 2020 to 2022 bull run to where VC's at today, yeah, what you saw then was you saw a lot of easy accessible money. You had the crossovers funds, you had the mega funds. Now, not going to name them by name because they're highly reputable people, but they were sort of going after this blitz scaling concept where they were like, okay, this is what you say you can do with 20 million. Great. We're going to give you $40 million. So you should be able to achieve everything a lot faster. So kind of like where venture capital is now, entrepreneurs weren't concerned about profitability or even customers. They were just concerned about raising the next round, which they were doing like every 8 to 12 months. Now, to bring it back to what's changed on the VC side, I think the bigger changes have come in VC. Well, actually, just to go back to entrepreneur side, now for the first time since I've been alive, are you hearing tech companies in their initial pitches talk about path to profitability and break-even points? Those were never a factor in at least Silicon Valley. I think in more emerging venture markets and capital markets, they were, but it was just never a thing. The name of the game was growth and scale at all costs. So now venture capital is in an interesting, I don't want to call it a rebrand, but it's at an interesting inflection point. Some people are calling it the great correction, and some people are calling it the great contraction. I don't have the exact stats, but like the number of new venture funds that were started in the past 5 years is like a hockey stick growth chart. So one part you're getting, you get the crossover public market guys who were trying to dabble. They've all retreated. And then you started getting a lot of like the tourists who wanted to dabble in venture capital, who hadn't really done their homework. And then on the complete opposite end of that spectrum, you have the tier one blue chip funds who are now raising 6 to 8 to, in Dreesen's case, $20 billion fund targets, which kind of has the whole industry scratching their head around how is anybody going to be able to deliver a real multiple on numbers that high? Because at the end of the day, venture is measured in multiples, not percentages. If you want 5 to 10%, you could put that in the market. But venture, you want a 2 to 3 to 5 to 10x return, which is seemingly, I'm not going to say impossible, but it's seemingly hard to think how someone's going to do that. That's like you need to own like 40% of like 2 Airbnbs and a Facebook in order to get that kind of return as a fund. And yeah, so I think it's an interesting time. I think the correction that happened in the middle of summer of 2022 was a very necessary step because it wasn't sustainable for 60x multiples on ARR. You talk to a founder on Tuesday, they want you to sign the term sheet by Friday and have the money wired by Monday. People weren't doing diligence, timelines weren't realistic, and as a lot of people, as a response, a lot of people lost a lot of money. But I think the unexpected side of that, which has been people being too cautious, is the lack of M&A and IPOs in the tech industry. I think there's a lot of good companies that took austerity measures and matured up and cleaned up their books and have very strong, sustainable businesses. But there's also private companies that are worth hundreds of billions of dollars, and they're just staying private. So we need the M&A and the IPO market to open back up, so that capital can keep flowing. The popular stat everybody likes to point to was 75% of all institutional money last year went to 30 funds. And of that 75%, 50% of it went to the top 8. That's not scalable long term, because that's just not how entrepreneurship works. You need the money to exist at all levels, in order for the entrepreneurial dream to come alive. Now, you can argue there's advances in AI with automation that people can actually run a fairly successful, high revenue producing business with little to no outside capital. But that's yet to be seen. So it's an interesting couple of years to come. But I think the biggest factor is the IPO and M&A market need to open up, and then I think we'll start seeing the capital flowing strongly again.
So you painted a really good picture of the industry dynamics of VC. And an important part about VC is that it doesn't just impact, the world of finance. It fundamentally impacts all of these nascent industries, like tons of different industries, and the way in which macroeconomics works can change the outcome in the future of how some of these industries play out too, which is really, really interesting. Thinking of not just sort of the dynamics of AI and vibe coding and what can be done with Gen AI, but even just deep tech. And when you paint a picture around major funds getting a lion's share of the LP's capital in order to go out and find new companies, you create a picture where there's probably giant gaps and missing pieces that lubricate the whole ecosystem. In Canada, for example, here, seed stage money for deep tech in particular, so university commercialization, things like that, are a major challenge. Like it's a huge gap, and there's a reason why companies aren't as successful later on, because they don't get started as early as they should be with the research that can potentially be commercialized. So I understand exactly the picture that you've painted. I hope the listeners do too. Let's sort of hone in on how that affects your individual decision making when it comes to communications and marketing around what you do. So what has changed for you when it comes to taking what's happening in the market, this market dynamic of venture investing, and managing your contacts for deal flow, managing up to find follow-on capital for next rounds, which are probably another challenge or area to get right, of course. And then probably just building out your platform so that you get more and more exposure over time.
Yeah, I mean, I think, venture is very much you get what you put in sort of industry. You work as hard and as long as you want and care to. There's not real deliverables per se. Like, I mean, I would love to be at the fund that's like, hey, you have to make a minimum of this many investments. Most funds is the opposite. Like, you have $100 million funds where each partner and even senior investors, they're lucky to make 2 deals a year. So I guess in that regard, it's how do you want to spend your time, and where is your best value? If you're a deal hunter, you have to keep hunting deals. And if your hands are tied and you can't deploy more capital, now you have to syndicate these deals, whether that's in a formal syndication like through SPVs, or if it's more the traditional venture style where it's just like, hey, I believe in this founder. Let me put him in touch with a group that fits their thesis that I know is deploying right now, which is a great way for you to stay top of mind, develop relationships, and strengthen them. And another thing, it's when you're sort of in the treading water period, that's when you start seeing more investors start writing articles, start doing more podcasts, start going on the tours, because you have to be a bit more concentrated and risk off. And kind of back to your point with the macro markets and the public markets, people wanted to say that Bitcoin was going to be a non-correlated asset. People thought venture capital was a non-correlated asset. But when the chickens kind of came to roost, it's clear when one thing dips, all other things dip, and rising tide lifts all ships. Hopefully, when things sort of bounce back, as apparently it's the same sort of money hands that are controlling it, right? It's probably 60, 70, 80% is quote unquote institutional, and then the rest is retail. So they're the ones that really move the needle. But like in our case, for example, I'm in a single family office where the head of the family isn't from traditional tech or business world. So he'd rather be cautious when people are cautious and greedy when people are greedy, to go back to the Warren Buffett adage, because to do the opposite, which is what he suggests, you need to have high conviction. So, while there's certainly people at every office and every team that have high conviction, it's very much a sort of democratic system, which I guess kind of goes back to your point around communication styles. Like, you are constantly communicating with so many different stakeholders in venture, from how you communicate from one founder to another founder at a different company, or even internally, when you're talking to the CEO versus the CTO. Another, kind of funny thing people always like to poke at is in, Silicon Valley, you get like the awkward tech guys, some of which have Asperger's, if you point back to like Elon, who their communication styles are sort of very nuanced and awkward. And you have to kind of learn how is it best to get them talking. And I think that's another sort of critical part, and to kind of hone it back into what the subject of your podcast is around communication. The first meeting is absolutely paramount. It's hypercritical, and generally speaking, my goal in that first meeting is just to get the other person talking and see if they can tell a cohesive and compelling narrative, either about themselves and why they're doing it, or why their company is going to win, or like in the case of like the awkward, super technical guy, they might be a bit robotic or scatterbrained around the initial story. But once you get them talking about the ins and outs of their industry and their technology, they become savants. So it's all about knowing like where to kick the tires and how to sort of poke around to see if they have it or not. And that's very much on the spot. And yeah, same goes with investors as well.
So one unique thing that I know about venture, not from experience, but from anecdote, is just as you painted the picture, partners can sit around and then they can move quick on 2 deals a year if you're lucky. And so it seems like it's a lot of wait, and then hurry up if a deal is hot, basically. If you want to get into
sometimes that hot deal ends up being a big miss.
True, that's true too. And so you just talked about how the classic, the initial pitch is paramount. Having a good impression, you're trying to qualify them or get them out the door as fast as possible.
Yep.
I once heard an accident. It's like a VC said, I want to figure out, are they a liar, a cheater, or a jerk? Like, that is like the something like or a liar, a fool, or a jerk. Like, that is those are the three things. But working in tech, there are all types of personalities, and some personalities don't have the best first impressions, and some have amazing first impressions, and that's generally what their skill set is, and nothing much more. How, when it comes to establishing, communications about relationships, managing trust, what other tools do you use to sort of verify your own thinking so you don't go off of vibes, or ensuring you maintain that trust in relationship?
Yeah, good question. So to kind of go back to your earlier point, right? The people sitting around probably isn't, exactly the right term, though. I know there's certainly a lot of people who think, VCs are just golfing and traveling. But I will say that, it's important to be careful because there's more bad deals than there is good ones. So proceeding with caution is it's prudent of you, especially if you're, difference between a VC and an angel. VCs have fiduciary responsibility to their LPs. I think angels can do a lot more volume because they're playing around with their own money. So, if they make a bad deal, no one can yell at them besides themselves or, maybe their significant other. So,
Sure.
when it goes back to sort of how do you break down the barriers and really get to know someone? One, having a deep network is important, and the venture startup landscape is a lot more incestuous than one would think. So that's why you have to be careful with every touch point, because people will, they'll back channel and they will message mutual connections and they'll dig deeper. I mean, there's other firms that, bigger ones that they do full background checks, they hire personal investigators, they dive in. I think, while I might not be that senior in my career or age, I've been around founders for my entire life. So I think I have a pretty strong sort of North Star and a pretty high BS detector. And I have some tricks to sort of catch people off guard, or to get them to let down their barriers, or to find out if they're, lying. Asking the same question a couple different times throughout different meetings. So you have to get to know these people. So, we're not signing checks or anything on the first, second, or maybe even third meeting. But I think one important thing to always do is sit down with someone when you're face to face versus doing an initial call or doing a virtual meeting. It's a different relationship, and it's a different dialogue and cadence. A call, a Zoom is typically 30 minutes. An in person is going to be an hour typically. And during that hour, you want to get to know them, learn about their family, learn about their upbringing, learn about their motivations, learn about their hobbies. Throw some, off the cuff questions around movies, books, how they spend their free time. Do they even have free time? So yeah, I think there's a bit more like pragmatic questions that you can also ask to get to know somebody versus kind of just drilling in on the business the whole entire time.
Focus on the human side and kind of see where they're coming from, and create more surface area to understand the other person too.
Sure.
What about developing trust around the opportunity? So not just the person. There's one thing deciding the person, but then there's sort of understanding their mindset around how to pursue the investment opportunity, and them asking to partner with you to provide capital for them. So what sort of evaluation technique, what sort of what style of honing in on the opportunity do you use typically?
Yep. Good question. So like me personally, what I love about venture capital, what keeps me excited here is that it feeds my ADHD and my like intellectual curiosity, unlike anything else. I love learning about new technologies, new industries, new problems, new pain points, and then diving in and figuring out as much about it as I can. And there's sort of two techniques there. One is just, spending 8 hours going down the rabbit hole on whatever industry you have with my 2, 3 screens in front of me and just researching away with 30,000 browser tabs open, and just, ingesting as much information as I can. The second opportunity, which you have to do both, is talking to the other people in the industry, which is absolutely critical. Like nobody knows more about the industry than the other builders. So that's one thing I like to do. If I'm kind of going down an industry for the first time, I'll try to talk to 2, 3 other companies in that space. Some might be competitive, some might be way more advanced, some might be way earlier. But the important thing is to talk to them and ask them about the tech. Ask them about the other person's tech. Don't reveal too much information, but nobody will tell you more about what's going on in their industry or about the technology or the opportunities or the variations of it than the people build it. And then if you have been down the industry path before, well, now you have a network of a couple other experts you can point to. And it's always important to do it. So, what I like to say is like, we're a value add investor, which a lot of people say, but like we do it in the truest sense. We only invest in companies where we've been able to make a strategic intro. Either that could mean a potential customer, that could mean a key executive that's been in the industry veteran, or it could mean a introduction to even a more vertical specific investor who specializes in that field. And we do this for any company that passes the BS meter and checks all the boxes that sometimes we don't even get to invest in because money doesn't grow on a tree, and we have to pick where we go. But we always try to value add, and if we can't add any value from day one, then it's not the right fit for everybody. Clearly, it wasn't meant to be. So yeah, I think that answers your questions. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It sounds like you provide a lot of value by helping the startups, and some of them are high potential but not a fit for investment.
Or not a fit for us, or not a fit for us at this moment. Yeah, there's a lot of factors that go into that.
But by tapping into your network, so you tap into your network, and your network is bi-directional. You use your network to get a sense of some opportunities, and then you use good opportunities to tap into your network. And I think that is the changing nature of where investment alpha is coming from too. I think that things aren't fitting nicely into a SaaS-like, business model as much anymore. There's a lot of deep tech. There's a lot of capital expenditure that's required at the moment in order to even see something through. And so you need to talk to domain experts in order to understand, what do we have here? What do we have here? Or are these well, the picture you were also painting is actually, to go a step back, there's a funny meme. There's a meme, or there was an article a couple of weeks ago, and it says, is all reporting just reporters trying to get into group chats? And so the idea behind that is that mainstream media, or just traditional sources of publicly facing internet media, is either behind or incorrect or absent. And so the way that things are happening on a small scale within industries are typically within group chats or small forums or
100%
small events.
The group chats are another critical element of the venture game, and most games, honestly. Group chats, whether they're super secretive lockdown ones that reporters shouldn't be getting into, but manage to find their way in, or they're public chats where, any member can add anybody that they believe can add value, to super specific geo or industry-based channels. I've kind of seen it all and been a part of most.
The
And I guess actually to go back to that, right? There is the power of like the group chat, the power of the online community. It's something that kind of what's got me really sort of gung ho about online funding platforms, such as what I was doing in crowdfunding and stuff like that. There's people that you've never met, but you're in a group chat with them every single day, and you're contributing to it. Or back in the day, we had the Facebooks and MySpaces and stuff like that, where you never met them in person, but you have a sense of who they are and you feel a form of connection to them, right? So, that's kind of always my part of my ethos was like, why does Silicon Valley have to be a physical location? Why can't everything be done online? Why can't, because bring that even back, right? Like VCs on Sand Hill Road used to say, I only invest in companies that I can drive to or that can drive to me. But I think with COVID, we saw that it could be a possibility with distributed teams and remote first workplaces. I think looking back at it now, was probably not the best. I don't think I would invest in a remote first team, especially from that 0 to 1 stage. And now, as I've gotten older, I do see the benefits of having a concentration of talent, specifically technical talent, such as what exists in the Valley. There was the center of the tech world was starting to drift from Silicon Valley leading up to COVID. And then with COVID, it rapidly accelerated. A lot have moved back, a lot haven't. But now with AI, with semis, with robotics, the center of the world is very firmly back in Silicon Valley, and in a way that probably hasn't been seen since the .com era.
Yeah, in person. So one thing that I always say is the online world can make you be anywhere. You can basically be anywhere. And so in a flip, this is very Marshall McLuhan, the media philosopher guy. He's like, if you can be anywhere, then the most important place to be is in a place where your tribe is located. Like that's literally the, so you can be well positioned to benefit and kind of have access. And even I think people underestimate, it's so funny, things that are so groundbreaking become commonplace within years. Even just using ChatGPT, the amazement of creating images, creating videos, people don't blink at it anymore. And it's almost like not cool to send some of the images to friends because you get shown that you're chronically online. Like but like the ability of doing that's like, so what now, basically. And so, and even another thing that's amazing too is 5, 6, 7 years ago, I would never even thought that I could close so many business deals just over Zoom, just over Google Meets. And now it's weird to think that you can't do that. And so as things have become way more, like, as you said, Silicon Valley's basically all over the place. It's kind of like rebirthed with a focus on just a deeper level of tech that now still, it's kind of like renewed itself. While at the same time, the older version of VC fundraising startups is now pretty much anywhere for the most part, just not at that sort of like, Valhalla.
The verbiage, the understanding, it's all there. The education, the information now exists everywhere. Yeah, I remember being in college from 2007 to 2011, 12. And I call that era like the silly app craze, right? So that was when social apps were becoming big. That's when I don't want to call them companies because they weren't. They were applications that had no business model, that had no revenue stream, nor did they have a path to a business or a revenue stream. And they were able to go out and raise, 10, $15 million. So I remember that was the era where every single student on a college campus thought about starting something. And San Francisco became the hottest place in the world to live. And I remember I would go home from spring break, visit my family, and I would meet other kids who would be spending their spring breaks in Palo Alto, which is about as sleepy as a town as you can have, especially for a young person. And, the flex was sleeping under your desk with a pillow. But I never thought much of it, given all I knew was Silicon Valley at the time. But, back then people didn't know, what an elevator pitch meant. They didn't know the elements of a pitch deck. They didn't know the taxonomy around acronyms and, what a series A, B, C even meant. Now it's readily available everywhere in the world, and anybody who's, worth half their weight as an entrepreneur, can talk this forward and backwards. So I would say that is the biggest sort of shift that has occurred.
I definitely agree. I think that the fact that we have this common language has enabled a lot of opportunity for people.
Yep.
Even beforehand, if you didn't know what a lean startup was, then you'd be writing a business plan for months, right?
Right.
And then trying to pitch something without any traction because you've crystallized what your opportunity is. Well, guess what? Because of group chat, the distribution is the name of the game now. And so distribution means that you need to be where the pack is moving. It's literally it's like the savannah. It's like the Great Plains. You need to literally move with the pack to go and find that next, body of water or area that you can graze from, type of thing. That is super, super important, because it's all in motion, and even things like intellectual property, but is fundamentally changing. And so again, distribution or supply and a lot of this has to do with, from a marketing standpoint, conveying ideas, actually sharing and pitching your vision, getting buy-in, having the ear of people, because there's so much. And this is, as much as big data and LLMs and sort of the processing of the power increases, there are still these nodes that can only process so much information. It's literally our ears. There's only so many bytes that can come in and out. So it doesn't matter how many data centers are coming online, the finiteness of being able to get someone's attention is going to just increase in value. And that's why I tell people, I'm like, who are your core 100 people that you want to pick up when you call them? Their attention is under attack. So you need to be defensive to stay in touch with them and have their ear and have them look at what you're trying to put in front of them, help them out with stuff, and work together too, and align on things, because it's going to be incredible, all the different opportunities that come out of this, but things are going to be very fractured, super fractured. And going back to GCs, going back to group chats, I'm actually starting to believe, my theory is whereas in the crypto world, or any other sort of industry, there's a lingo. There's always an insider lingo and an outsider lingo.
Yep.
And if you spend any time out of it, for us, we were crypto native for a cycle, right?
Yeah, you don't want to come off as a normie.
Yeah, you do not want to come off as a normie, and that goes for every single industry, I think, because you're kind of dead in the water. If you say, "Oh yeah, how long have you been in Web 3.0?" People
Yeah,
will be
no.
like, "What are you talking?" Yeah, you're discredited instantly. And
Yeah.
so my belief now is that with vibe coding and just the democratization of tools, of digital tools, that it's not just the language that's going to be insider, the actual way that we use the tools are going to become tribal as well. So things like there's a glimmer of that with NFTs and sort of tokenizing spaces and tokenizing clubs and things like that. I actually think
That's true. Yeah, people still do have the club tokens, which is fine. Like ticketing NFTs is fine. It's just like, yeah, I see what you mean with the
but the
tiered
actual
models and stuff.
like the UI will be foreign, be like, I don't even know how to use this. Might be the
So,
case too.
very well, maybe.
Um anyway, so in a roundabout way, I think we've talked about venture capital, sort of its evolution, your insights from your days in moving from Silicon Valley and sort of bringing it elsewhere. We've talked about, the sort of the intricacies of deal flow, the psyche of a venture capitalist. And we talked about sort of the future of communications a little bit here too. What, you know, if you were to talk to another entrepreneur, what sort of unconventional take would you have for them, that's helped you using your own experience around say developing your network or getting in a position where you can help other entrepreneurs?
Good question. What have I done or what unconventional way? I think the biggest thing you can do, um, if you want to be in venture capital specifically, is you need to get your deal velocity up. Like you just have to get used to looking at deals. You have to get used to looking at deals. You have to get used to analyzing them. You have to get used to talking to founders. You have to get used to saying yes. You have to get used to saying no. You have to you got to get that velocity up as quickly as you can. The faster, kind of go back to like the 10,000 hours rule, right? Like the earlier and faster in your career, you can just start talking to entrepreneurs, the better off you're going to be. And I think the best way to realize if you're doing a good job of talking to those entrepreneurs is if those entrepreneurs introduce you to somebody else. That's kind of your North Star is okay. I talked to these three people. I'll this week talk to another 3 to 5 people next week. 30 days go by, 2 to 3 of them have introduced me to more people to talk to. All right, now you have some momentum. Now you know what you're doing. If those aren't reaching those fruitful sort of next steps, or they're not asking for follow-ups themselves, or showing you what you discussed with the action items, then maybe you need to start talking to more investors and getting their time, which is really something you can only do earlier in your career. Few investors are just going to let a 35-year-old, pick their brain, but they'll let a 22-year-old or a 19-year-old do it. I don't know why, but this is kind of how I've always seen it and felt around it. I could be wrong. But I think getting in your 10,000 hours, getting the deal velocity, like you don't have to have any money or even be in VC to do that, by the way. You just got to find a way to get in front of investors. And it could be, get in front of founders. And it could just be going through LinkedIn and picking something that you're going to hone in on, right? Like, all right, I'm only going to look at my alumni network. I'm only going to look at my hometown. I'm only going to look at an industry that I know very, very well. And I'm just going to go through and set the filters and click around and find whoever I can. And I'm going to add them. I'm going to message them. I'm going to get creative with, a note or try to figure out their email address. And I'm going to try to get in front of as many entrepreneurs as I can. Even as a tier 1 VC, you still have to hunt sometimes. still have to find a way to get in front of people. And it could be a cold email. Could be you just figured out their email, you have a clever subject line, and you figured out how to get in front of them. And then once you do get in front of the good companies, now you have to add value to them. Oh, okay, this is what you're doing. Cool. All right, let me introduce you to somebody at company X, or let me introduce you to somebody at VCY. Because that's even without a network, without a fund behind you, that's what you're doing, a good portion of your day, regardless. And there's nothing stopping anybody from doing that. I have a buddy, he's in VC now, but for 7-8 years, the guy would just probably send out 50 to 100 emails a day, just and LinkedIn messages, just cold outreach, warm intro, cold outreach. And he just did it nonstop. And he built an impressive network. And now he's, pretty decently regarded in the venture world. And I've seen people do it at much different scales. But yeah, it's get it going, get cracking.
I like how you did not, we did not rehearse this, but you talked about referrals. You basically said, build up your velocity, and your North Star is how well folks regard you, that they want to introduce you to other people in their network. So this is a partnership network,
Yep.
quote unquote, informal, which based on referrals. And so, at the end of the day, businesses, hammer this home, communication, the foundation of communications are your one-to-one relationships, and a strong indicator of your NPS score, your promoter score, is if you are referred in to someone else. And I think that
1,000,000%, always. Like, even your best deals should be coming from founders you've already invested in, or VCs that you've done deals with. Like, it's very much a referral system. Yeah.
And it's like 1+, we need that Kevin Bacon. It's it's an old reference now, but it's
Yeah.
6 people away from Kevin Bacon eventually.
Right.
So that is super key. So that's great. Really appreciate it, Sean. Thanks for being on this episode of the Conveyor Cast.
Thank you.